Welcome to the Iroquois County Historical Society's Old Courthouse Museum. This building is filled with an amazing amount of artifacts that almost all have a tie to Iroquois County. And we'd like to take you on a tour of the building.
The Watsiko Courthouse was on the west end of town, and it burned down. And that's when they built this one.
Micajah Stanley, who was one of the early settlers, donated 8 plots of land for the site of the construction. Construction started in January 2nd of 1866. And it was 1890 when they brought a water line in so that they could have restroom facilities in the basement. They also brought in electricity, and throughout the courthouse, I think there were about 55 incandescent lights.
One of the reasons I think they built these courthouses where they did, so you could see it for a long way off. And maybe if you're from somewhere else, you don't know where it is. Well, you see that building standing there, you're going to find it.
My wife and I stood in here and bought our wedding license when this courthouse was being used by the county.
By 1965, in the early spring, everything had moved out and gone to the new courthouse over on the east side of town.
When I came, we had Judge Roscoe South, and Oma Hathorn was his court reporter. Well, then he passed away, and then Judge Orem came in.
Judge Goodyear was down on the main floor.
He was on the main floor.
And he was right across, actually, from the treasurer's office.
He'd walk around, "Would you have an extra cigar?"
Oh.
We didn't have air conditioning in here, and it was so hot in the summer. And you'd wear those high heels, and you'd go tripping around and going around. Many times I fell on my bottom. Those high heels would just slip. Those marble floors would just get wet, and you would just, down you'd go. When tax time came, you kind of dropped your other work, and everybody helped. So you'd carry those books upstairs, and they were heavy going up and down the stairs. You carried all those books, and you had to do everything by hand.
I know of a gal in our office, she was carrying one of those heavy books and dropped it on her toe and broke her toe.
I was the state's attorney of Iroquois County from 1956 to 64. The new courthouse was opened as I recall it, January 1st of 65. Catherine Clifton had left significant property to Iroquois County in order to build the new courthouse and jail. When we moved into the new courthouse, the question, of course, arose as to what are we going to do with this building.
And then, of course, the vacancy of the building caused it to fall into disuse and disrepair.
The county board wanted to tear it down.
Right.
And a group of citizens from around Iroquois County did not want that to happen.
This lovely lady, Clara Nelson, she was the wife of an attorney. She came to me one day and she said, "You know, I heard you're the new judge's wife, and there is something that I would really love your help with." I said, "Oh, what would that be?" "I'd like to save the old courthouse. We have to get a lot of signatures from all over the county. Sometimes I took my horse, sometimes my bicycle. So we got the signatures."
The building had been neglected for a long time. They took the corner posts in the courtroom and made lamps of them, and they took all the jury chairs away. It was just being dismantled.
And they formed a historical society at that time, as I understand it.
It was a very daring thing when we went to start a museum. We had no money. Clara Nelson came up and she gave us $1,000. Now, without the $1,000, we couldn't have started anything. I was up trying to plaster the ceiling in the hallway, and I didn't know anything about plastering, but I went up and bought some plaster stuff. And I was on a ladder, and Milton Brady came in, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we've got to paint the ceiling, and we got to plaster this hole. And I don't know anything about plastering, but I'm trying to do it." So he said, well, just get down from there. He said, I'm going to do it. And he was the best plasterer around here, and so he did our plastering.
The building was saved, but it was by the hair's breadth. It's to the credit of countless people throughout this entire county and the people who once lived in this county that this building continues to exist, and it truly is an education for especially the young people to come and see something about their past.
The first time when I came here was when I was here with Cub Scouts. I got to see stuff that was in the past that I don't see now. You can bring stuff in that you had, and you can just explore and look at cool stuff. Like 100 years from now, they'd probably have some kind of flying car, and they'd look back and say, oh my gosh, I had gas-powered cars back then.
In June of 1970, I got a phone call asking if I would be interested in helping form a genealogical society, and I said certainly. I had started doing some genealogy work. So we had our first meeting in June of 1970, and there were 19 people there.
These people were very dedicated. They started bringing their own stuff in to start, I think. At one time, one of our members was going to the courthouse, and he noticed in the lobby all the deeds and real estate records were all piled up. They were going to burn them. So he loaded up his pickup truck and brought them here.
They have all kinds of records here from the old courthouse. And they have, 80,000 obituaries and various genealogies that people have donated. They've also inventoried most of the cemeteries in the county, so you can find where people are buried.
When I was working in here, I've had a young couple come in and says, do you have anything on that name? We have over 70,000 obituaries indexed. I pulled out a name, and that girl just was crying. She says, that's the first time I saw my grandparents' names. You know?
This room is our Indian room and rock room.
Early in the history of the county, there was an Indian battle out north of Crescent City.
These are all Indian artifacts, tomahawk heads, work knives, arrowheads for hunting, arrowheads for war.
These are beautiful stones. They all got a history behind them.
Up here are some of the different types of wildlife you'll find in Iroquois County.
We run out of stuff to put where to put them, no shelves. So they talked to me about it, and I said, well, we could mount them up on the wall if you want to. So we did, and then there was a lady from Sheldon came in and did all that painting around here, and it really made it look good.
My favorite animals when there's the squirrels, because the squirrels are like boxing.
Things that would be at one time or another unique to the area. That right up there is an old beehive sitting on top of the case. That was what they used for keeping bees and let the bees make their combs in there. Then they would get some honey out of it.
And a couple of small rabbits. Oh, there's the mastodon teeth.
From the lower jaw of a North American mastodon.
We had this school class come over with the teacher. One proud little boy came up to me, just darling. I know which teeth they are. I said, well, which ones are they? George Washington's.
That's probably the oldest item in the museum.
I would think so.
If it wasn't for this place, a lot of these things would be lost.
On the walls, you see artwork. This changes every 2 months in the museum. It's artwork that is done by residents of the area. What better place to exhibit it than in the museum?
We have a quilt show going on in the museum, and they're displayed, as you can see here.
Quilts have much history in the patterns and so forth. They're for warmth and beauty. I mean, and history because the one I'm standing in front of has many names on it, so it's a historical quilt. This quilt I found in the trunk in my father's home. It's way older than I am.
And we also have pictures, old newspapers. There's some old carriages up there that are kind of neat.
Paul Roberts became one of our early presidents. His idea of that we were going to have a lot of fun doing this. He always had cookies and coffee waiting, and everybody just had a good time. But we worked like crazy. 22 women made a big committee. They worked and they worked, and they made the Victorian room and the kitchen. We had 47 rooms to work with.
And they had the art room, and they had the Victorian room, which was beautiful. A lot of rooms. And the word got out. So people started donating. Now they come by the droves. Lots of people, and that's what we were aiming for.
This is the Victorian room, decorated like a parlor would be in the
1800s,
1890s or something like that.
Right. I would imagine that this is one room that would be used for things like entertaining, family get-togethers, maybe Easter dinner or something like that.
So this is what an old kitchen might have looked like. Stove burned cobs.
Whenever you shelled, why, put the cobs in the cob house and you burned those until they were all gone. Then you'd burn coal or wood.
Mm-hmm.
Great place to be early in the morning in the winter time.
It smelled good and it was warm.
It was warm, which was a lot better than those cold bedrooms.
I'll say. That's a beautiful piece of furniture behind you there.
This area shows cameras, and I see looking up here, we start going back to the old box cameras. You just made sure the light was at your back so it would shine on the people that was in front of you, and then you just look through the viewfinder and you click, and that was it. As things got a little more sophisticated, you would use a light meter, this right here, and take a meter reading of your subject. That would give you a good idea of what to set your shutter speed or your lens opening.
This room is referred to as a doctor's room. We even have an x-ray machine and just various kinds of items that you would find in a doctor's office.
This, of course, is all the instruments. One doesn't care to dwell on too much as far as looking at them and wondering what did they use those for. Sometimes it's a wonder they made it through.
Rather gruesome.
Yeah.
And in this room,
these are all veterinary instruments.
I came to Watseka in 1961 to start a practice, and on the first day I was here I met an elderly veterinarian by the name of Dr. Richard Hampton, who was quite an influence on me. I don't know how many dairy herds there were in the county. I think I probably serviced about 25, and I know other veterinarians service herds of dairy cattle, but today there's one dairy herd. Some of the instruments, this is a dehorner for dehorning adult cattle. Some large syringes in this box that were used to treat swine, and there were a lot of hogs in this county at one time. This is a blood chemistry outfit. It came out in the 1960s to check all the blood chemistry of an animal. This is a tattoo outfit that we tattooed calves when we vaccinated them against brucellosis to tell that they were vaccinated and when they were vaccinated.
and this is the farm room, farm-related implements in here. Oh, this is an egg incubator where you duplicate the old hen setting on the egg.
Put your eggs in there, and you'd have to open it up and turn them every so often.
This is an interesting item. It's a hollowed out tree, and I was told that the farmers used this to store grain in. It was a pretty good sized tree. And how'd they get the inside out of it? Cream separators.
Oh gosh, yeah.
When you milked your cows, you brought the milk in, dumped it in the top, somebody turned the crank.
Milk would come out one spout and the cream would come out the other.
The big things in milking cows today is they got a robot that milks them. And ever since I was in the 3rd grade, I milked every morning and every night. We did everything by hand then. We got in the barn when it was below 0 and the cows were nice and warm, so you sat on the stool and you milked the cows.
The animals really kept the farm going.
Yes, they did.
The horses were your horsepower, of course. You had the chickens, you had the beef, that was for your milk. Also butchered it for the meat.
The farmer had almost everything he needed.
He was pretty self-sufficient back then.
We always had to work hard, but we enjoyed it. Made a good man out of us, and we learned a lot too.
It was a good life.
It was a way of life back then.
The reason for livestock was the farmers needed them in case they had a crop failure. But now they have crop insurance, so that they don't have to rely on livestock.
A couple of breaking plows.
These old plows just were slow and cumbersome. They didn't do that good of a job, but with the mold board plow that had the disc that cut the ground before the plowshare dug into it, laid it over, that's what made the big difference.
And you could stay at a certain depth.
Right.
You could set the depth.
Yeah.
These things were up and down
Depending on how you held
how
on
well
to the
you could
handle.
hold it in the ground. Yeah.
And this right here is the bank of postal boxes that people would have in the local post office. The postal person would come up and you might have a special delivery or might have a package they couldn't get in the cubby hole, so they'd hand it to you through here. This would be something for the women to see. This would almost be a shopping place for them, wouldn't it?
It would, yes.
They would find just the latest in fashions that they would want, and dresses, any type of hat. Look at the shoe. That was the fashion of the day, way back in the day.
By the time you got that laced up, it was time to take it off and go to bed. This room is
the sporting room.
Sports room.
Yes, indeedy. Let's see, well, Buckley Dutch Masters, the Narga Indians, the Yeoman Owls.
A lot of those schools are consolidated now.
Right, Sheldon Rams, Donovan Wildcats, Milford Bearcats. Do they have the Golden Horseshoe around here anyplace? Remember that?
Yeah, it was in here, Roger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's it. Sure it is. Went from school to school, and it was in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone had the Golden Horseshoe, why, if you beat them in basketball, your team got it. And of course, it always ended up at the end of the county tournament with whoever won the tournament. Then the next year, it all started all over again.
They took possession until they lost it. Now, here's a place you want to stay out of.
Okay, let's just close him in.
Yeah. This is an original jail cell, original to the building.
We didn't go there very often. It was a kind of a strange place. People said there were some strange things going on sometimes, little spooks or whatever. I never saw anyone. I did hear footsteps.
We have a prisoner in there. He's sleeping right now. This was Iroquois County's jail for a long time. Pretty bad place.
It would be pretty gruesome staying in here. The representation of the one-room school.
The desks have a hole in them that held an inkwell. The stove.
The old pot-bellied stove that kept many a schoolhouse warm.
The blackboard wasn't even mounted, so I mounted that on that wall. And then this bookcase over here, I tried to make it look antique, and I built that. But this room here kind of brings back old memories to me, because I was raised on a farm. Especially these desks, they make you think of the old times. You know, those old country schools, they were about 2 miles apart. It was about all there was.
I could never imagine how you could have first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, eighth grade in one room. How could the teacher possibly handle that?
They did.
That group, but they did it.
I went to a one-room schoolhouse. Almost all the kids walked to school, some not too far. I walked 1 3/4 miles. What sticks in my mind mostly was the teachers that I had.
When I first went to school, I had a lady by the name of Fern Wright. Hell, I fell in love with her.
There was always the proper etiquette. You know, you wouldn't have found them in a tavern. You wouldn't have found them associating with the wrong people. They set the standard for what was expected of the pupils that they were teaching. The teacher would arrive early because she had chores to do before she started her teaching. She would, in the wintertime, have to get there early, get the furnace started, haul in wood or coal, cobs, the water from a pump in the yard that she had to do by hand. This place has a lot of history, and what better way to learn it than firsthand?
Here's some more ladies' fashions.
They say the fashions of yesteryear.
All right.
Pretty fancy stuff.
This was what the ladies would wear when they were really going out to something really special.
I tell you, some of these women had beautiful clothes. All this rare silk and everything.
And people need to say, well, what were the fashions then? That's fascinating. Maybe some of the fashions are going to come back and you can recognize them.
This was obviously a better class.
Better class of
Didn't find this
living,
in a farmhouse.
Out in the farmhouse, out in the country, right.
Even got an old pump organ.
I don't think you'll get anything out of it. Oh, you do.
There we
Amazing, yes.
We were very fortunate to have people on the board that really cared about this building.
The big problem was the lack of money and the deterioration of the building. The roof was in bad need of repair, it leaked, the furnace was old, and the heating was bad in this building, and the front steps were very deteriorated.
We had a leak in one of the things in the boiler room in a circulating pump. We had downspouts that were coming off the wall. We had water in the basement.
They made a wonderful building.
The board seemed to always show up, serve, get done what was done.
People are really shocked at how wonderful it is when they come in and see all the rooms and everything that has been done.
You know, if you look around and you see the Indian artifacts or the medical devices, the old school room, the parlors, Victorian parlor, these things could have gone, you know, out the door.
And every item in this museum means something to somebody. It did at one time. Why are we here? How do we get here? There was somebody before us. Somebody crossed the mountains, somebody crossed the river, and then later somebody built the bridge for us to get across the bridge. We need to know where we came from, why we got here, and we ought to honor those people who did all that for us.
When I came to this town, I didn't have an automobile. The younger people today need to understand more about their roots and what the sacrifices were at the time this county was settled and countless counties like it. to live without paved roads, electricity, indoor plumbing, the fundamentals of life, food, clothing, and shelter is what we spent most of our time involved in. You can imagine, if you have an imagination, what others did in order to have what we have today.
We were in the Depression, and we always were able to raise a garden and chickens, and so we never were without food. When I was very young, I could remember World War I. We would roll bandages for the soldiers.
The Civil War stuff, it was nice to see that.
My husband and my brother were given a trunk, and it was all Civil War stuff. We were sorting it out outside the building. We picked up his hat, and a breeze came along, and it all blew away. But we gave most all those things to the courthouse, and they're still there.
To come into this room and see all these uniforms and a lot of this paraphernalia that's stuck around here, it kind of brings back the 4 years that I spent in the service.
We've just really been lucky to have people that were willing to donate these things so that the public can see them. A couple Civil War rifles here.
This is World War I, shell casings. World War II, one of the neighbors lost a son over in Germany.
This is a World War I German machine gun. That was found in a haymow in a barn up in the Donovan area, Roger.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be darned. This is all uniforms, hats.
There's a Japanese machine gun.
Yeah.
This patch here is the 25th Division, and that was the outfit I was in during World War II. So I was over there in Leyte and Luzon.
Well, I went in the Navy in the first part of '43, same as Jim. We was pretty young kids at that time. Right there is that's a second-class pharmacist's mate, and this is a yeoman's patch right there. And this is a motor machinist mate, second class.
Well, this is McClellan's saddle. He was an observer in the Crimean War, and he saw that they were using this saddles like this over there. So he came back and told about it, and it was adopted by the military. Then if you'll notice, it's got a slit in the middle, and that's to prevent soldiers from chafing from perspiration on long rides. But in various places, there's one. It has initials of soldiers who had used this saddle. Apparently they didn't take the saddles with them when they transferred from one fort to another.
Okay, here we have the ladies, women in service. And it's interesting, they had them flying aircraft to deliver and ferry.
I understood the women flew the airplanes from the factories to the various fields where they were ordered.
Right, and then pilots would take them overseas. And here's nurses' uniforms.
We lived in a bunker made out of wood. We had about 4 feet of dirt on top of us. There were pretty steep roads there and no lights. We had powdered milk, which didn't taste pretty good. Went on R&R one time, and I think I drank a half gallon of milk because it tasted so good. I shot a 57 recoilless rifle, which would shoot a mile accurate. Been shot at a lot, but been missed a lot, so here I am.
I was scared from the time I went in there in combat until I got out. I was scared.
When I seen the Golden Gate Bridge disappear in the distance, I got scared there, and I never got over it until I got back to the States again.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it again for $1 million, but I wouldn't take $1 million for what I went through.
Yeah. When the war first broke out, There wasn't nobody forcing us to at that time. We volunteered.
I think about what all the people have given, what all the veterans have given for this country, what all they've gone through to keep us safe, and how much we owe them.
This is the music room. We had a man that was pretty popular in the square dance circuit, and his son gave us his dad's violin. And a lot of the wall displays are from the Ponton family. And we next go to a representation. This was set up to represent what the back porch of a farmhouse might look like, but it's picked up a few extra things.
Well, I'm sure the old back porches did pick up a few things too, but...
Yeah, that's an early washing machine.
Right. You put your clothes in here and your soap and water and just go back and forth with it. And then, of course, back there, this was high technology. That was a little bit lower technology. That was the washboard and the tub.
You had to really rub the clothes in.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
This is what a typical kitchen might look like in a farmhouse.
That's your old wood-burning stove over there, or cobs, or coal.
And you had a dry sink. Didn't have a drain in it, did it? I mean,
No.
it did, but it just drained into the bucket and threw it out the door. There was no water in the house except for a cistern pump, and that was water you did not drink.
No. For your drinking water, while you had your outside pump.
Your well, and you carried that water in.
You carried that in, and then you use that for drinking water.
People have told me that there would be ice on the water.
Oh, I'm sure.
In the morning when they woke up.
Yeah, you have to break the ice. Yeah.
I was born in Belgium. I came to the United States. I immigrated in 1948, December of 48, and landed in Watseka in 49. I was born and raised in a big city. First place I landed was out in the country. They didn't have any running water or outdoor toilets and so forth, and it was like the end of the world.
Bedroom, marble top furniture, high headboard bed. When you didn't have a bathroom in the house, that's what you used.
Yeah.
It was either that or get a lantern and dress and go out to the outhouse.
Or you had the chamber pots underneath the bed here, and of course those would have to be emptied in the morning.
I thought, oh my, what is, you know, in Europe, you always think of America being way ahead of everybody else. They were not.
And Milady would have to get all laced up in something like this when she was going to wear one of those fancy dresses, wouldn't she?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. The shoes again, a straw boater.
Remember the old, yeah.
Song and dance man.
Ooh, that won't fit me. And this is just another typical room like you might find in homes and furnishings.
Here again, I think we're reflecting a little bit nicer furnishings as far as the chairs and the sofa, and of course the fireplace.
Old vacuum cleaners, nice baby carriage over there. Most of these on the shelves are office machines.
Everything was by hand. You started from scratch and you did it by hand. Yeah. They came in with their little committee reports, and they'd go to each different secretary to have them hurriedly before the meeting to type up a little report. Those calculators, bangity bang, and that addressograph. Wasn't
the
that
addressograph
noisy?
was very
noisy.
noisy.
The addressograph was so noisy. It was blink, blink, just pound, pound,
You would
pound.
hear that more than what we would.
You needed a good strong hand to handle one of those back then.
And some girls could really type fast.
Oh, they could type words and words a minute.
Various churches have donated items to us. The cross on the wall is from a Christian church here in town that had a fire, And after the fire, they found that in the debris. The story I got was that when the Russians were coming through Germany at the end of the war, they were heading for Berlin. They were burning everything that they could.
There was a soldier, he was a German soldier, but he was in Russia for a long time, and on the way back he came by a totally destroyed little chapel, and he found this beautiful carved head. He brought it to America, and when he found out that I was doing this, he was close to Watzika, he brought that head over, which was like a saint in this chapel.
Supposedly, that was from the time of the Crusades. All right, let's move into the courtroom. Lisa Immel and Helen Crow stood on scaffolding. They were younger girls then.
She and I decided one day we'd start to do something about the courtroom, which needed everything.
There she was on those tall ladders with the, I did the painting and the scrubbing, and she did, the after scrubbing. They were so dirty. Those things hadn't been washed in 100 years.
6 years we worked at it. We made draperies.
I had never seen a sewing machine. And the Singer sewing man, in his lunchtime, he taught me how to learn to sew on a sewing machine.
Lisa Immel sewed them. She didn't know how to sew. And I basted. And we lined all the draperies.
A lot of famous trials held here.
100 years there were a lot of stories. And of course, one of them was they broke in and they executed the man because he had held his son down on a hot stove.
There's quite a history goes along with this. This happened in 1879, that they hung a fellow with this rope. I mounted that thing so people could read it, something about the old jail.
A school teacher friend had asked me to ride along for some business in Gilman, so I rode along and we saw an accident where a man died. And I was summoned as a witness to the trial, and I sat outside the regional superintendent's office most of the morning waiting for being called for the jury. And at noon they came out of the courtroom and said, "We've got it solved. We don't need you anymore."
This is like a homecoming to me. I came into this courtroom as a practicing lawyer in September of 1950. At that time, I was the youngest member of the Bar Association. I'm now the oldest member of the Bar Association, and that time seems just a short time ago that I first stepped here.
For 98 years, law and order was decided in this room here in Iroquois County. And justice was meted out, you might say. Right up there is where it's done. The judge's bench, prosecution, the defense, and the jury. And hopefully 100 years from now, it'll still be done the same way.
The museum has been a wonderful thing in my life. Just all these people that kind of outdid themselves. There's no museum anything like it.
I'm a nut for collecting some of this garbage. I say garbage, but it's a beautiful thing. And I think that's kind of pushed me into coming in here and doing a little work.
We are proud of Iroquois County history, and we want to preserve it. If we don't have a place like this, then people are not going to contribute things.
The children come and they enjoy it. It's wonderful education.
Have somebody explain what
we really did with this old stuff.
Maybe there's something here that a grandparent had. And I think that is valuable to every child, to have that connection to family, to the community, to just know of what came before.
It's extremely worthwhile. We learn from history. To the extent that we don't learn, we suffer the consequences.
It's here. I mean, now whether we make a use of it, that's our problem. The people have got it, they've cataloged it, they know what's here, and they can find it for you. All you have to do is ask.
What a thrill it's been to do these things that we never expected to do at all.
They do a lot of hard work here.
It really happened what I hoped to see someday. Tons of people. When I go there, and I think that's what we were hoping and praying for.
This is the history of our county. It's a history of people in this county, and it's our heritage. This is your past.
It's an important thing to this community. Has been and will be forever.